Welcome to the Always Bayern Chelsea show. This is a special video edition, so head over to YouTube and check it out. We're doing a Zoom call here as Bayern's loss to Barcelona has driven me away deep, deep into the North Woods. But today is Monday, October 28th, and we had some good wins for both Bayern and Chelsea over the weekend. So let's jump into it.
Couple of super solid wins for Bayern, and of course Chelsea. And I'm wearing the jersey today, the Palmer Mint jersey from last season. So yeah, amazing weekend for both teams. And Chelsea started off a half hour before Bayern started their own fireworks with a beautiful, beautiful, hard fought victory against Newcastle.
Yeah, I'm sad that I only got to see the first really half an hour and then the highlights of that one because that would have been a fun one to watch live, and I'm sure a stressful one at the end there.
Yeah, it was a good, solid Premier League match. There are lots of elements that I liked from Chelsea. They dominated certain aspects, had their typical defensive lapses at times. I think Newcastle ended up with a higher XG. I wouldn't necessarily look at that as something that really was a fact of the game, which maybe doesn't make sense. But if you actually watched, I think most would say Chelsea were in control for most of the match. They end up winning it 2-1 off of two great goals from the main contributors all season long at Chelsea, Palmer and Nico Jackson. And quite frankly, the midfield dominated Newcastle, and that's kind of what drove Chelsea to that great victory.
Yeah, this was a mature win for Chelsea, and I don't know if I always could have said that about Chelsea, the last couple of years. I think a lot of their youngness, their youth was showing, but this match in particular, I thought was a huge step in the right direction and just in terms of maturity, but especially from that midfield. I mean, they've pretty much been dominant for most of the season.
Yeah, maturity is a good way to put it. It's coming off of a press conference where Maresca is challenging players to become leaders, specifically Reece James, but he also mentioned he's kind of challenging everybody to step into leadership roles and build a better team together, build leaders, and that's certainly what they're doing. You saw that from Reece James specifically in the match. Guys like Levi Colwill as well, leading the way. And starting with the lineup, Maresca did make a change from last weekend in the lineup, putting Reece James at left back, Gusto at right back, which I thought was very interesting and ended up being a great call because Reece was able to really command the defensive line, made multiple clearances, blocks, had a great day defensively, and Gusto kind of could go back to what he was used to on that right side. So besides that, everything else was basically the same through the midfield and the defensive line. Lavia getting the start again over Enzo. Only change up top was that we saw Pedro Neto at left wing over Jadon Sancho. Great move by Maresca again there because his pace really was the difference in the match. Newcastle could not keep up with him. He was amazing in attack going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Neto had an awesome match, and I think it was great that he got the start. Like you said, Neto's pace really made him the choice for the start there. I think that Sancho has a lot of creativity and he's really good at dribbling, and there's certain aspects of his game that make him the right choice for certain matches, but yeah, not I guess not this one. Um how was the like for most of the match, the inverting situation? Do you think Reese and Neto are just better on that side, whereas Gusto's better on the other side with Noni?
Tough to say. I mean, I think it works on a match by match basis. That left side was the strong side on the day against Newcastle by far. I thought Noni had a really off day, and I think he's going to be in danger for the Premier League lineup starting 11 in losing his spot to somebody, whether it's a Neto going to the right wing or whatever the case may be, even putting a Palmer there and Nkunku in the 10, which I'd still love to see. We'll get to that later maybe, but yeah, that side with Gusto, Madueke just wasn't as strong. I think they weren't putrid, but Gusto just hasn't been himself this year, which I think we've talked about a little bit. And James and Neto were just very solid on the day. Reece at times played some passes that reminded me of when Enzo plays in that deep midfield role on that left side. And then he has the entire field in front of him to play those long passes whether it's to a left wing or all the way across. Multiple times in this match, specifically in the first half, Reece was bounding balls to Nico or Neto or people up top, which I thought was interesting. And that's what I think he can provide on that left side at the left back role, where he maybe can't as much if he's in the right back spot or inverting over there. So that's an interesting wrinkle. What I think is just great is Maresca showing he can adapt, be flexible, make all these different lineups and changes, and most of them have been effective.
Yeah, I think just as a coach in general, that flexibility, that adaptation is a huge, huge asset to have. And then I also think that it's important to, while you make these different, man selections in the lineup, it's also important to carry that identity over. And I think just even watching the Conference League matches with Chelsea, you can see that there's still some sort of underlying Maresca identity just throughout the entire roster, both rosters.
That's been a huge, huge part of their season so far. It's been shocking how well that identity has been able to shine through, seeing that they've only been learning under Maresca for, 2 to 3 months at this point. And right now, this stretch of the year, between yesterday's game, Sunday, I guess, when this comes out, and Wednesday's game, both against Newcastle, you're really going to see that identity tested because let's say Newcastle put out the same lineup as they did Sunday, or basically the same because they're not as deep as Chelsea, and Chelsea go to their 11 that they've been using in the Conference League, you'll see two different lineups against that same Newcastle squad. And yes, you have one home, one away match, but that's where you'll be able to see if they play the same way and have success. Watch out to every other team. That would put every team on notice, in my opinion, because that's a coaching masterpiece if that happens.
Yeah, and I mean it shows depth in the team, but it also would show the ceiling for this type of a team would be almost unlimited if that's truly the case.
And speaking of unlimited potential, Cole, Jermaine, Palmer, the guy's insane. When we talk through this game, the guy gets a goal in the fourth minute, gets waved off, similar to Kane against Barcelona. His toe, I don't even know what it was because later when Isak scored for Newcastle, I think he was less onside than Palmer, but somehow Palmer's gets waved off. A beautiful through ball from Nico to Palmer, slots it in. Fine. They take it away. We can't have everything. But Cole says, all right, you don't want me to score. Fine. I'm just going to be deep in the midfield, turn, be barely even looking at my opponents and teammates, have a worldly pass from an angle that nobody can even make this pass, gets through two defenders, Livramento and Schär, I think, on Newcastle, finds its way with perfect pace to Pedro Neto, who escapes from the defender, puts it on a platter for Nico, and Chelsea are up 1-0. Is there anything left I can even say about Cole? Because that display was insane.
Yeah, I mean that find in particular, that I mean that's just world class. The ball that Palmer had, and then yeah, I mean to Neto too, to his credit, and obviously Jackson to finish it off. But the key thing to think about in that goal was Palmer's initial ball. And again, I don't want to discredit Neto or even Jackson, but great assist too.
Yeah, the pace of Neto there is what made that play effective as well. Worldly pass from Palmer, but if it's a Sancho there, that play is not working. And
Yep.
that's nothing against Sancho, but he doesn't have the pace of Neto. Only Mudryk really has the pace that Neto has. And Nico, you could look at it that as a simple finish, but maybe last year he's not putting that away, and you still have to take what's given to you by Neto, with a perfect pass there. So that was great. As I mentioned in that first half, the midfield was looking pretty solid. Lavia and Caicedo together are just locked in right now, and Enzo is not going to be in that starting 11. Whether you agree or disagree, if you're listening, watching, I just think Lavia right now with Caicedo, they're so consistent, so strong, and Lavia is going to be rested a lot. He's never playing 2 matches in a week, so as long as that's the case, he's going to be fresh and ready to go.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about the Chelsea squad from last year. It was injury after injury after injury. So, you can look at it, I guess, one of two ways. One way, maybe you are going to need Enzo in the starting lineup if somebody unfortunately were to get injured. But the other way you can look at that is there's such a less likelihood for that amount of injuries just because of the depth of the squad and because they're playing, not playing two matches in a row or two matches in a week. So, I mean, yeah, it's just another plus for this Chelsea squad.
Yeah, as long as Enzo Maresca can keep guys like Enzo Lavia, Caicedo, even the Casadets, and the Santos once he comes back from loan. We'll talk about him maybe in a later pod because he's lighting up League One. But it's going to be interesting to see if all these guys can remain happy with their roles. To manage that, it'll be tough for Maresca, but we'll see. I will say the one part in the game where the midfield did get sliced a tad was Newcastle's goal. Later on in the first half, Lavia gets beaten by, I think it was Bruno Guimaraes in the midfield. They kind of just work the ball to that left side, and then Livramento and Hall, two former Chelsea Academy players, are able to connect. Hall gets the ball across to Isak, who puts it away to tap in. I think Reece didn't communicate as well as he could have to Fofana and Colwell about Isak running in. Nothing Sanchez could do. Maybe a cheap goal to give up, and that's going to happen with Chelsea right now with their defense, unfortunately.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think that was right after I turned on the Bayern match. That was around what, the 32nd, 33rd minute or something. So I'm pretty sure I didn't even catch that one, but yeah, we move on from there. A lot of game left.
Yeah, literally a minute after you had turned it off. So whether we're blaming it on you or not remains to be seen. But you know, we talk about the defense. Interesting day from them. Fofana was maybe one of his worst matches. Sanchez, I don't want to go too hard, but his distribution is the poorest in the league right now. Didn't have much to do from a saving perspective. Guys like James and Colwell did step up with clearances and blocks. Kind of a mixed bag, and that's what Chelsea's been a lot on the season. What I do like is that they fought hard. It was a grind out match, and they come out in the second half and put a second goal on the board right away, which is so key. And second halves have been huge for Chelsea. I don't know what it is, what Maresca does at halftime, but it's awesome the way he's able to, whether it's changing a little bit of tactic or just motivating them to play really well. And Palmer gets that second goal early on there.
Yeah, and that's huge. It's huge from a coach to be able to make those adjustments at halftime because, you can plan and practice and train and have all the tactics in the world, but if you can't make adjustments mid-match, you're gonna struggle mightily, especially in the Premier League against a solid team like Newcastle. But yeah, that second goal was awesome by Palmer, who just continues to shine.
Yeah, and it was created by kind of gaining possession back in Newcastle's half. And I think Lavia is the one who ends up poking it to Palmer. And then he pretty much takes it all the way down. Fabian Schär for Newcastle does a really poor job of not getting far enough to his right if you're defending looking at Palmer, leaving that space where he can go near post. And it kind of looks like Nick Pope should save it the way it's scored, but it's really because his defender is leaving him with all that space. And when Palmer slots it in perfectly, you can't really do much if you're Pope there.
Yeah, I mean, if you give Palmer that amount of space, he's gonna score 9 times out of 10. Um, and yeah, just the slicing and dicing in the way that Palmer is able to make movement. He's creating the space. I mean, this goal in particular, I think there was just too much space left, like you said, but some of that's also Palmer creating the space. So, he's just so deadly accurate with his shooting when he has that amount of space. And at that point, it's like, yeah, that's going to be a goal.
100%. Palmer's a guy that is just tough to stop ultimately. Eddie Howe said it after the match. He's just a problem right now, and the Premier League is recognizing that. And as far as the rest of the match, Chelsea were able to grind it out. As I mentioned, multiple blocks, clearances. They did make four subs. Mudryk came on for Madueke, which was a good sub, putting Neto over onto the right wing. Enzo replaces Lavia. I think they're just being cautious with Lavia throughout this season. And Enzo's a great replacement as a midfielder at that point in the game. Cucurella comes on for Gusto, throwing Reese over to the right hand side where he's so comfortable. And then Cristo comes on for Nico. I think that's a sub you're going to make basically every match unless there's something weird going on. But Cristo actually drew what was originally ruled a penalty in the box off of a really nice run. He's kind of on the left side, tries to cut it back into the middle, and then would take a shot. Kind of got tugged down a little bit, but they basically ruled that it wasn't enough. I probably agree. I think live, you just don't call it a pen, and then there's no issue. It was kind of crazy that they did overturn it, considering what Chelsea had happened to them in the Liverpool match, not getting a pen. Jadon Sancho on Trent Alexander-Arnold, I think it was. But
Mhm.
yeah, refereeing is always going to be a big topic, and I'm not going to once again get into it. And overall, the subs, we're fine. Nothing crazy. Mudryk had a shot that he probably should score, but was a nice save.
Yeah, I mean, that was I wish I would have, like I said, I wish I would have been able to see the end of that match live, but I'm gonna just keep coming back to the word maturity because that was just a mature end and a mature finish from Chelsea. I think last year's Chelsea team doesn't hold on to that 2-1 lead for the rest of the match. I think they concede and it probably ends 2-2.
1,000% they end that game 2-2. I actually hit a draw bet at halftime. I also had a full time draw bet, and it was almost like a win-win for me because I wanted Chelsea to win. But if they would have drew, I would have gotten it. But great to see him hold on. Reese makes a beautiful save, heading the ball over the post in what ended up being the second last action of the game. Newcastle get a corner right after that, but awesome to see how fired up he was. Ends up on the ground. Colwell picks him up. He's hugging them. They're going nuts. I mean, this team, they have each other's backs. They're growing together. Youngest team ever in the Premier League. Haven't had a guy play a match that's under 28 or something, which has never happened. I mean, that's absurd how young they are. They're going to dominate the Prem for the next 10 years. I mean, they're just building something so special. I don't want to get too emotional here, but they really are, and it's so exciting to watch. They're just a great team right now, and it's fun. It's fun.
They're a super fun team right now, and you're right, they're going to continue to be a fun team, with all this young, youthful, exciting, electric talent. And yeah, that clearance from Reese at the end there, I mean, that was just amazing. That was like a diving, pretty much, yeah, just lay your life on the line, lay your body on the line clearance. And I mean, what a way to end it.
Brilliant way to end it. A neutral watching that probably would have thought it was a brilliant game as well. Awards, I'm not going to go too in depth here. I've basically highlighted all the players I think were great. Palmer, James, Neto, the top three on the day for me. Colwell, maybe the best defender outside of Reese. And that pass, Palmer to Neto, I just want to highlight one more time, whether it's the moment of the match, the moment of the week, the month, the year. I mean, that pass you don't see very often. You really don't. To put this in perspective, his body is basically facing, if you can picture the corner flag toward his goal, where they'd be defending, you're facing back that way. And then Neto's starting to leak out where your left wing is. And you somehow whip the ball while your body's facing that opposite direction and curl it perfectly between two defenders from the opponent. So try to picture that if you're watching and listening, because it can't be done, and yet it was done.
I mean, I think that just highlights why you should be watching if you're only listening right now, because you just had some beautiful hand movements and gesticulations to show, you just can't get that if you're an audio only listener at this point. So, yeah, pull it up on the YouTube channel. Obviously, don't forget to subscribe. I forgot to say that at the top, but who cares? Maybe you already are. I'm good with Palmer for man of the match. I gave Robin to Neto, and like you said, defense I gave to James, and then I think Caicedo was a good one to highlight as well, just because we talked about it. That midfield is the glue of this team right now and continues to look hot and share great chemistry.
You could give Caicedo an award to every single match this year, and that's probably underrating. You know, it would be underrating, but he's been underrated, I guess, is my point because he doesn't make all the highlight reel plays. He's more of a defensive midfielder, so that's going to be the case. But he's been, as I've said many times, the most consistent player outside of Cole Palmer. So agree with you on that. And for those watching, next time I'll try to get a whiteboard so I can really draw out how Palmer made that play. But awesome match, and I'm just excited to see what Chelsea can do at St. James Park visiting Newcastle on Wednesday. And I'll probably watch it hopefully on my train home from Chicago after a long day, but going to be exciting.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be a fun one, and Bayern's got another midweek match as well, playing Mainz in the Pokal. So, do we want to take a step back and look at Bayern's match over the weekend against Bochum?
Let's do it.
Okay, so Bayern, yeah, traveled to Bochum over the weekend, home of Leon Goretzka. I will start off, I guess, by saying that. Um, and yeah, so a little bit of background. Bochum is a bottom of the table team, in my opinion, one of three worst teams in the Bundesliga. So Bayern was looking for a big win, especially after the disappointing Champions League Barcelona match. And the lineup was relatively similar with maybe one or two changes. So Neuer was the keeper, Davies left back, Kim and Upa in the middle, and then Conrad Leimer at right back. I had predicted that Rafa Guerreiro was going to get a rest here, and I think it was good. He didn't have his best performance in the Champions League. Again, not a natural right back, so there's that. Polina in the midfield alongside Joshua Kimmich, and then Serge Gnabry got a rest on the left wing. Kingsley Coman started this one. Jamal Musiala was back and healthy at the 10. Michael Olise, the right wing, and Harry Kane up top.
Yeah, and that's a strong lineup for Bayern, as they should have put out a strong one after a tough match against Barcelona. Even facing a lesser opponent in the Bundesliga, you want to start to build that momentum back, and that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, so in the beginning of the match, I do want to mention there was a scary moment. It was probably around the 8th minute or so. Kim was just positioned too high up, and he let, I forget who it was, but one of Bochum's attackers just run right past him. The pass sailed right over Kim's head, and it was a situation where Neuer kind of ran out and I think got a touch on the shot, which actually allowed Kim to use his pace and get back, sliding into the goal, basically clearing that one at the very, very last second. So, again, we've talked about it a lot. The positioning of the defense, specifically the center backs, and honestly, more often than not, it's been Kim, continues to be an issue. And then I'll highlight it because it was a very good move to just get back and save it after the mistake he made.
Yeah, I ended up seeing that play later. I think they were showing it at halftime or something. So I was thinking it was later in the match. And I saw it from the perspective of just seeing the tail end, Kim making that save, and then
Mhm.
later went back and realized that he was part of the mistake. But even so, you make a mistake, at least you do have the wherewithal to go chase it back down and not allow the goal to happen.
Yeah, so then the first goal came in the 16th minute. Um, Michael Olise took a free kick just beautifully. Um, Kane was taken down as he was shooting, basically American football tackled, which was maybe a good decision because Kane shooting from the distance he was shooting at oftentimes ends up in a goal. And yeah, Bochum just played that whole match really recklessly and aggressively because honestly, what else are you going to do when you're playing Bayern? They're a lot worse of a team. So I think they tried to rattle Bayern right away. But anyways, that all accumulated with Olise taking a free kick, just lofted right over the wall, put right in a place where the keeper couldn't save it.
Brilliant free kick, and you go over the wall, as you said, you're never saving that. So good choice by Elise and puts it away.
Yeah, and then the second goal happened in the 26th minute. Jamal Musiala actually had a header from another set piece, which Kimmich took. And it looked to me like Kimmich and Olise were almost like talking as to who's going to take the kick. Bochum expected Olise to take it, and then Kimmich took it quickly, which I'm sure was all a plan. I'm sure they meant to create that distraction. And yeah, then Kimmich basically lofted the ball right to Musiala, who almost never scores headers. So that was just awesome that he got a header. And again, it's just great to have him back in the lineup.
Cheeky little header too. I was very impressed with the way he was able to get that in the goal.
Yeah, and just overall, it's great to see Bayern scoring off of set pieces. That's not really one of their strengths. And adding somebody like Olise, you have to hope and think helps with that. So yeah, I mean it's good to see that. And then, the rest of the first half, Bayern had a few more chances. They weren't extremely clinical with their finishing. Things were a little bit sloppy. First half, you can't complain about being up 2-0, but it wasn't really the best half Bayern played, and I don't think it was really the type of performance they were looking for.
Yeah, the first half I didn't catch as much, just as Chelsea were playing a little bit during that stretch. But I was kind of seeing the score line, and it seemed like, as you mentioned, they probably could have and probably wanted more, especially coming off a tough loss. So not ideal, maybe, but you're still up 2-0, like you said, and it is an away match, so you just never know sometimes when you're playing on the road.
Yeah, and then the 57th minute came my moment of the match, which was Harry Kane scoring a goal assisted by Jamal Musiala, who just really cooked the defense on that assist there. He probably dribbled past three or four people like Musiala could do and just laid a great ball to Kane, and then Kane had a great, finishing shot like Kane does, just deadly in those situations. He's not going to miss that. So at that point, it was 3-0, 57th minute. And like I said, that was my moment of the match. At that point, things seemed like Bayern was kind of closing the door.
And it was my moment of the match as well because at this point I'm closely watching, knowing that I have a bet for Bayern to win by at least 3 goals. So I need that third desperately. And just as I'm thinking that, as you mentioned, Musiala, the way he just can slither in there, he's got to be a Slytherin because he's unreal. But Kane puts it away beautifully, as Kane does. I think Kane, maybe had a semi-pedestrian day, but for him, that still means he's getting the goal.
Yeah, the first half, Kane wasn't involved very much at all. And yeah, you definitely, you know, a guy like that you need, and I'm sure he wants to be and feels like he needs to be more involved in the match. So really the whole attack in the first half I didn't think was great, but getting Kane on the board there was great. Especially because that 3 to nil lead at that point meant that in the 61st minute, um, Kompany was able to go and get some subs in there because he at this point we need to rest some guys. We have a bunch of midweek matches. So in the 61st minute, Sane, Muller, and Goretzka come in, and yeah, it was, like I said, extremely important, I think, for how the season progresses to get some of these other guys some rest.
Yeah, and I even texted you about it because I was surprised seeing Leon that early. Loved seeing it. I'd seen a guy like him that's meant so much to the team over the years, but hasn't done much this season. Huge for him, huge for the squad. Who knows if it means anything for his future? We're not going to read too far into that right now, but I personally just loved seeing that.
Yeah, me too, especially at Bochum. That's his old club, and I think that's where he's from. But yeah, at that point, with Pavlovic being injured, I guess, and then Limer playing right back because we have injuries at the right back position, you don't really have any other options if you want to make a switch in the midfield, but to go to Goretzka. And I thought he did all right when he came in too. He had a shot he could have slash should have probably finished at the end of the match, but he was involved in the attack and he was just involved in creation. So yeah, like you said, it's good to see him on. I also thought it was great to see Sane come on because I've been wanting him to start, quite frankly. I think someone like Gnabry and even Olise at times have been looking like they need a rest. And you got a guy who's as special and electric as Sane sitting there, maybe we're just nursing him back to health with his injury, but um, I don't know. I feel like I don't want Olise to get injured. Him and Gnabry are both injury prone, so I was happy to see some rotation in this match.
You need matches like this. You need rotations like this because when you go against tougher teams and guys are struggling that start, you need to be able to bring somebody off the bench that's confident and feeling themselves and is able to grab you a goal or bring you some fire and energy. So building that together as a team in your starters and the guys off the bench is huge. And I think will be key for Kompany going forward because as he tries to figure out what's best for his team, he's going to need to rely on some guys on a certain day that maybe you wouldn't always consider.
Agreed. And, speaking of Leroy Sané, the 65th minute came around and he just had a vintage Leroy Sané moment and scored just a beautiful goal. I mean, one of those goals that it seems like only he can do, where he's just dribbling with lightning speed, looks up for, I don't know, 1 second, and all of a sudden he's curling the ball. It was one of those shots where it starts on the outside of the post and curls into the net. And he just does that in the blink of an eye. It's like a lightning bolt strikes, and all of a sudden he scores a goal.
Yeah, that was brilliant. I'm trying to look at what I even texted you. I don't recall, but I know I was pumped seeing that because you've been talking about Sane and getting him more minutes, and so to see that for him was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I think you sent me a beautiful audio message, honestly, with some chants going on there. But anyways, the match continues on. The 69th minute, you had Tell come in for Kane, which was good. Tell is a guy who, man, it's been a disappointing year for him. I've needed to see him more on the pitch, and I've needed to see him do more like I thought he could, and like I still think he can when he gets those minutes. It's hard when you're only playing a few minutes every so often, but I'd like to see him do more. I think it's great that Kane came off. Kane never ever comes off, and when it's 4-0, you got to give Kane some rest. I mean, he's a guy who's dealt with injuries himself, so good to see that sub come on. I thought Tell could have done a little bit more in this match, but helped with creation. Had a good shot at one point, but didn't put it away. I think the keeper saved it, and then in the 71st minute, Kingsley Coman, who had had a quiet game up to that point, tried to outdo Sane with the goal of the match and just put a screamer in with an assist, I will mention, from Alphonso Davies. So that was awesome to see. It was great to see Coman get going because I've needed to see that.
Ring, ring, ring. Oh, who's that calling? Oh, the Saudis? Oh, you want Coman? He just scored a brilliant goal. Okay, that's what the Bayern directors are probably thinking because, tell you what, when he's scoring, it's either great for Bayern, as I've said, or it's great for the pocketbooks of Bayern.
Hey, I mean, we'll take it at this point. We've got a little bit of an overflow at that winger position, as we've been saying. But yeah, the 78th minute, Eric Dyer came on. Didn't look great, honestly. I mean, he's not somebody who can play center back in this company system, unfortunately. He just doesn't have the pace for it. He's a great communicator and a great leader, but just doesn't fit in this system. So that's kind of how the match ended, a 5-0 victory for Bayern. And, there were some low points in the match for sure, but we'll take a 5-0 victory any day of the week, even against Bochum.
You'll always take that. There's always talk about not having the perfect win. So much talk today for those that follow American football about the Green Bay Packers barely squeaking by with a win. You take a win. It's a tough league, whether it's a Bundesliga or the NFL, whatever league it is. You take wins all the time and ask questions later.
Yeah, so I'll just run through my match awards here. There was a million guys you could have given these awards to or shouted out, but take your pick of the bunch. I'll give the man of the match to Musiala. I certainly thought he had the best match. My Robin, somebody I haven't talked about very much this episode yet, but Alphonso Davies, just a great, great match by Davies again. If you look at his stats, he helps that left side of the pitch with Coman so much, and just honestly, Coman plays wider than Davies most of the time. Like Davies is just in the center of the pitch with Musiala and contributing to the attack. It's awesome to see. Underrated fire. I had to give it to Zane. We kind of talked about it, but man, good to see him back with that goal. My defender, I gave to Upa. because I already talked about Davies. I thought Upa had a pretty solid match.
Yeah, all this praise for Davies from you is great to hear. I'd say there's another call from Real Madrid or something coming, but they're too busy protesting Vinny Jr. not getting the Ballon d'Or. So
Yeah, I might just refuse to talk about the Ballon d'Or on this program, but we'll see. I don't want to give it too much credit, for what it is. Maybe we'll talk about it more in another episode. But I also wanted to shout out Muller because he came on and looked all right too. Talked about Goretzka. I think Kimmich had a great match. I think Polina had a great match as well. So, not enough awards basically for a match like this.
and let's not forget, there's one other man that even if he didn't have to do a lot, he still gets a clean sheet. Manuel Neuer, well done.
There we go. Also, Michael Olise. I look at this lineup and I'm like, oh, I guess all these guys kind of had a good match. But we'll hope that carries over into this week. We got Mainz in the DFB Pokal on Wednesday. I'm going to race home from the woods and try to catch that one in real time. But we'll see what happens. And yeah, we'll of course give you a recap of these midweek matches as well.
I will note as well, because you mentioned Olise there, I saw his stats thus far are pretty much identical to Palmer's through the amount of games they've played. I think they both have like one has 7 goals, one has six. They both have 5 or 6 assists. So that was interesting to see because they're kind of similar left-footed. Palmer plays a little more centrally, but just was interesting to note. So well done to both those guys.
Awesome. Well, don't forget to like and subscribe, of course, on the YouTube channel. Check us out on Twitter. We'll be doing our whole coverage. Check us out on TikTok, Spotify, Apple, everywhere you can, because we got a lot more good stuff coming. And I think with that, I will send us off. Mia san mia.
Up the Chelsea.